Hello, I'm Alfred.
And I'm Chris.
It is Thursday, and this is Why Wait Till Sunday. Probably a top 5 midweek college football DFS show. All right, here we are. It's week 5. And we are cruising along. I think we talked last week a little bit about getting the hang of this season. Every season has its own flow. And I'm certainly excited to bring y'all another Saturday slate with my co-host here, Chris Moxley. What's going on, buddy?
Not much. I feel like we've been riding steady last couple of weeks. I think we've had some good calls and a couple misses here and there, but I think we're in a good place. I think that we're behind the scenes expanding a lot of the data that we're bringing in, and we're really improving our process a lot. So I'm excited to take on the rest of the season, starting with week 5.
Yep, never too late to get on a winning streak. And without further ado, let's dig into some of that data you were talking about that you have been able to pull. And of course, we're going to start with the main slate. So Arkansas at Georgia. I'm going to open us up here. And I think this is probably not going to be a super exciting game for fantasy purposes. These are two pretty good defenses. Arkansas's defense is actually very good, and we know Georgia's defense is extremely good. Number one, defensive EPA per pass. And you've been talking about EPA all season. So that's expected points allowed. If you're not familiar, that basically every single play that is run, there is a calculation that can be done to determine if they are basically more likely to score after that play or less likely to score after that play. Of course, you want your EPA, expected points added after each play, to be higher. Well, the Georgia defense allows allows negative EPA per play or per pass. So every time you drop back to pass, so far this season, you are in worse shape than you did before against the Georgia defense, which is pretty incredible. But also Arkansas is in the same boat. They are allowing negative EPA per pass as well. So there's not a lot of exciting passing game going on in this matchup. Probably, honestly, not a lot of fantasy goodness. Both these defenses are very good. The over-under is 48. Now, Georgia is projected to score 31 points. The total of Arkansas is much lower at 17.5, which is actually the lowest on the slate. So maybe you want to. I think this game probably goes under this total. I don't see Georgia putting up 31 on Arkansas. Maybe late they start running it in, but they mix up their backfield. I just don't see a path to a lot of that high-end fantasy potential in this matchup. Tennessee at Missouri. On the flip side, I'm going to give you a fun one to talk about, Chris. Give us some info about Tennessee at Missouri.
Yeah, this is a fun one. I think both of these defenses leave some to be desired. I've talked about Missouri's defense probably for like 3 weeks now. As just they have the worst rushing defense in the country. I mean, they're just ranked bottom 3 in every key statistic. I think this is a slate where you can just push all your chips in on Tennessee's rushing game. I'm interested from the Missouri perspective. Tennessee's pass defense is okay. They're allowing they're ranked 73rd in EPA per pass attempt. So I don't think that they're really much to write home about. So I think Connor Bazelak is an interesting play this week. But overall, I mean, this game's total is 63, and Tennessee's favored by 3. But I think this could be a really prime opportunity for a shootout. So I'm excited to see this game from a fantasy perspective as well as just to watch it on the SEC network.
Yeah, and I think there's another game. Obviously, we're going to get to it. That is just going to be the chalkiest chalk game in history. And I think this game has a chance to be as much of a shootout in terms of just points scored. And it could be a interesting pivot to have players from this game rather than the big one that we'll talk about. I mean, it's not even a spoiler, but I won't say it yet. Next is going to be Texas at TCU, and uncharacteristically, Texas Christian is pretty bad on defense this year, which means this game is a major target. There's going to be a ton of points scored this weekend. This game is 67 over under. Texas projected for 35 points, Texas Christian for 31. Both teams projected over 30 points. That is kind of rare. So yeah, I mean, just the definition of a shootout. Texas Christian's defense, absolutely atrocious. One thing you've added into our data set here is explosive pass rate and explosive run rate, which I really like. I believe is that passes over 20 yards and runs over 10.
That's exactly what it is.
Okay, so it's the percent of passing plays for the pass explosive pass rate that a team gains over 20 yards. And TCU is 124th in the nation, allowing a 20-yard or more pass on 43% of the is it attempts or completed passes?
No, it's based on attempts.
Almost one of every two times you drop back against TCU, you're gonna throw it for more than 20 yards. That is mind-blowingly bad. So, Casey Thompson and certainly some of the receivers from Texas are probably in play here, but the Texas defense is not much better. They're a little better on the explosive pass rate. Just to give you an example here, the explosive pass rate allowed for the Texas defense is 21%, and they are 82nd in the country. Texas Christian is literally twice as bad, even though they're ranked 124th versus 82nd, but there's obviously a gap there. I think as you get worse, the gap gets bigger. They are twice as bad as Texas, and Texas is bad at allowing explosive pass plays. Neither one is very good against the run either. The offenses are both pretty good. I mean, this is a pinball game, and we'll talk about the players in a little bit. Next up, on the reverse end of this coin, Michigan at Wisconsin. Have fun with this, Chris.
Yeah, I'm not going to spend too much time here. This is a 43.5 total. Wisconsin or Michigan's favored by 1 currently based on, what book you look at. Both these defenses are really, really good. Wisconsin is ranked top 2, top 4 in basically any rushing statistic that you look at. Their pass defense isn't quite as good, but it is in general top 30, top 40. Michigan's pass defense is the same. Graham Mertz was horrible last week. Cade McNamara isn't really much to write home about. I think this is going to be a game that it's set at 43.5, and it could still go under that. It's going to be a close one, but this is a classic Big Ten game where I don't think there's much fantasy value to be had. So I won't harp on it for too long.
Stay away. Louisville at Wake. This is a fun one as well. Like I said, I mean, you might have to score 300 points in your lineup to win this week, to win a tournament this week. Wake Forest at Louisville. The over-under here is 60. Wake Forest projected for 33. Louisville for 26. Louisville defense is terrible, especially against the run, allowing 30% of the rushes attempted against them go for over 10 yards. That's the explosive rushing rate, ranked 114th in the country. EPA allowed in the rushing game. Their pass defense is actually okay. So if Wake Forest is going to have a field day, it's probably with Christian Beal-Smith. And then you've got on the flip side of that, the Wake Forest defense, kind of in the inverse of that, not very good against the pass. They allow a lot of plays to be run against them, kind of middle of the road, actually, on explosive pass allowed and pass yards per attempt. And their defensive EPA per rush is actually 3rd in the country, shockingly, for Wake Forest. So, I'm not sure where to attack this game if you're going to, and there's so many other games that have like ridiculous potential that I'm not sure this is one where you're really going to get too excited about it. If anything, maybe the passing game from Louisville and the running game from Wake Forest. Next would be kind of a meh game. USC at Colorado. USC coming off a just disastrous game last week, getting rammed into the ground by Oregon State.
What's new for USC over the last couple of years anyway? I mean, it's just constantly they've been in trouble since really Clay Helton started, and now he's gone. But I think his ghost still lingers over the program a little bit. Yeah, this game is a 50.5 total. I think there's a chance that it goes under as well. These are two of the slower teams in the country. USC ranks 124th in rate. Colorado ranks 94th. Both these defenses they're okay. I mean, they both have their weak spots. I think, USC is allowing 36.7 explosive rush rate, which is pretty good, which puts the Colorado rushing game in, potentially in play. Jarek Broussard, Fenton, maybe you go deep with a Sean Clayton, but the Colorado offense has just been so bad under Brandon Lewis. I thought Lewis was going to be better and more dynamic, but he's been quite poor.
He's been
terrible.
Dreadful.
Keaton Slovis hasn't been much better. He's just, I think some people are still holding on to what he was 2 years ago, and he just hasn't been that player, but he is at the helm, and Colorado's defense is somewhat okay against the pass. They're ranked 58th in EPA per pass attempt, so maybe it's exploitable. I think the best plays in this game are going to be the Colorado running backs, and probably looking at Drake London on the other side.
Yeah, Drake London always in play with his target share, and especially in PPR, he's just like going to flirt with 10 receptions every single week. Cincinnati at Notre Dame. This is a good game from a football perspective, especially if you like running and defense. But from fantasy purposes, I don't know. Notre Dame's defense has actually been not that great, at least I guess compared to last year where they were darn good, top 5 unit in the country, if I remember correctly. And this year, they're allowing a lot of plays. Their explosive pass rate is 15%. That's 73rd in the country. Again, it just goes to show you how absolutely bad Texas Christian is. I mean, they're like 3 or 4 times as bad as Notre Dame, and Notre Dame is not good. So explosive pass rate, 15%, explosive rush rate allowed 24%. So that, they're allowing, they allowed FSU to have some big plays. So their defense is not really excellent, but they don't allow a lot of per pass plays. So EPA per pass is pretty low, a top 10 unit in the country in that metric. So I don't really know what I would do with Cincy. I mean, you could look at, Ritter's always in play because he basically controls the offense on the ground and through the air. But it's just, I don't know where all the points are going to come from if you need a high ceiling. And I think this week you've got to have a high ceiling for every single pick you have. 51 total, 26-24 is the projected margin there. Cincinnati defense, granted, they don't play a Power 5 schedule, but like they're a top 10 unit, top 25 unit in the country. They're very good across the board on almost every single metric. Maybe you flirt with Kyron Williams. He's actually a good value this week, I think. But again, the ceiling in this game is non-existent. And congratulations, Chris. I'm going to give you about 30 minutes to go over this game. You've hit the jackpot. Talk to us about Ole Miss and Alabama.
Yeah, this is the game of the week. I think from a football perspective and a DFS perspective, I just don't think you can go wrong with this game, to be honest. This is a really, really exciting matchup between really two of the SEC's premier offenses. Alabama's defense, and I talked about this yesterday on Twitter a little bit as well. They're ranked 68th in defensive EPA per pass attempt and 58th in defensive EPA per rush attempt. This is not the same Alabama defense. So they're still getting their feet under them. They always lose key pieces to the NFL. The COVID season was weird, but this is a vulnerable defense. And we saw Florida really take it to them, especially in the trenches. So I think that we can see a high scoring game. Obviously, Vegas expects that. The total is currently 80, and the spread is currently 14.5. Both teams are projected over 30 points. Alabama's projected over 47. Ole Miss almost at 33. This is just a beautiful matchup for DFS purposes. I think this is going to be, how do you get – the real question is not do you play players in this game? It's really going to be how do you get different in this game? And so I think that's some of the conversation that we'll have tonight. But this just – an 80-point total on any slate is just.
I mean, we haven't seen that this year yet. I don't think we've even seen 70, much less 80 yet on a slate, have we?
I think we got close last week with Boise State, Utah, which was a bust.
Yeah.
That ended up at 69, but nice. But
But 80?
80 is absurd. So I think there's a couple different ways to play that game, and I think we'll go into it later. But you just have to invest in this game.
Yeah, there's just, I mean, I guess you could do like a $1, tournament and fade it completely and just kiss that dollar goodbye. And in the insane turn of events where we've seen this happen before, though, like you said, the Boise Utah State game went under. Utah State only scored 3 points, I think. So it doesn't make any sense. Sometimes that happens. You could fade it. I wouldn't put a lot of money on fading this game, but maybe you do a 25-cent or like a $1 thing and just fade it completely. Oregon at Stanford, not a lot of excitement. I mean, Oregon is a good offense, but like they just don't have any dominant singular players. And Stanford's defense, pretty good against the pass, dreadful against the run. And then Stanford's just not really much to write home about there. And Oregon looks like they can be had on the ground, pretty good through the air. And without Thibodeau, is he still out? I mean, they can't rush the passer nearly as well. So I think that is a big deal for Oregon. But they're number 3 in the country, and they got their sights set on the playoff already. We'll speed it up through the last 3. Texas Tech, West Virginia. Anything there, Chris?
56.5 total. I think both these defenses are vulnerable. I expected West Virginia to be better. They're not quite as good as I think they thought they were coming in. Their DB unit was supposed to be very good. Currently, they're ranked 71st in defensive EPA per pass attempt. I think that opens up a lot of opportunity for Texas Tech passing game. Even if Tyler Shuck is out, Columbia came in and looked pretty good last week, so I think that's interesting. On the other side of this game, I do think Texas Tech is vulnerable in a couple different areas. They're allowing good explosive pass rate. I think that, Jarrett Doege isn't exactly an explosive passer, but I do think that a guy like Letty Brown could be involved in both phases and really make his mark on the game. So it's an interesting game, but it's not my favorite on the slate. We have 80-point totals that we're dealing with.
Yeah. I mean, there's games that normally we'd be interested in that we just kind of can't mess around with this week. And one of them, I think, is Oklahoma, Kansas State. Like, man, Oklahoma, disappointing is an understatement, even though they are undefeated. And this game has a 52-point total. Oklahoma is projected for over 30. Kansas State only 20. And Kansas State can be had through the air. Down near ranked 100 in opponents' yards per pass attempt, explosive pass rate, EPA per pass, and stout against the run. But Oklahoma doesn't give a crap about running the ball anyway, so they're just going to throw it, maybe 40 to 50 times this game. So Rattler's interesting, I guess, because the volume should be there, but man, his stats have not been there. I don't know if you can afford it, and we'll see where his price point lands. Kansas State, not interested in anybody. Their offense is kind of crappy. And this isn't the week to play Deuce Vaughn, who's the only guy you'd really care about on that offense anyway. Although Oklahoma's run defense is terrible, but I don't think we can mess with that this week. And take us home with Ohio State at Rutgers. What a dud to end on.
Yeah. So this game is interesting because Rutgers actually put up a fight against Michigan. They covered fairly easily.
Did.
Yeah, they covered fairly easily last week. My Scarlet Knights, even though I took Michigan, I think that this is going to be a struggle for the Ohio State offense. Greg Schiano coach teams always play super hard. They get up for this kind of game. That's the kind of coach he is. So I think that they're going to struggle. It sounds like CJ Stroud is back this week. I think Rutgers, not really. I mean, Ohio State will be fine. Their receivers will be fine. Trevon Henderson will be fine. I mean, everybody on the Ohio State offense should be okay. They're 15.5 point favorites, so they'll be good. But Rutgers did limit Michigan to 20 points. Michigan had been scoring fairly well. So I think this is a capped ceiling game, even if the total is 56.5.
Yeah, not too interested in that either. I mean, I hate to be too reductive, but like you do Ole Miss, Alabama, you do probably some Texas, TCU, Tennessee, Missouri, and then sprinkle in a couple of other guys. If you really, you probably can't afford to be too different than including those games. All right. So now let's talk about the players, as we like to do, starting with quarterbacks. There's there's three big names, and the two biggest obviously are in the game that we've been salivating about. Let's cut to the chase. Bryce Young comes in at $10K, Matt Corral at $9,200. Now, Matt Corral being the third most expensive quarterback on this slate makes no sense to me. He's coming off a 50 burger, almost a 60 burger. He hit, well, I think he had like 59 points last game.
Yep.
But he's averaging 42 points per home game. This is at Bama, but he runs the ball. He just does it all. He's incredible. He should be right next to Bryce Young at 10K. So I do think there's a little discount there at 9,200. He worked Bama last year. I'm not really worried about the Bama defense.
No, I'm not either. What I talked about earlier, right? They're outside the top 50 in both EPA per rush and EPA per pass. This is just not a very solid Bama defense right now. They're okay. They have the talent to get better, but
Sure.
Right now they just don't have the cohesion to pull it off. So I think you're spot on. I think Matt Corral, $800 cheaper than Bryce Young, is just like a fantastic value. Like at the high end, it's hard to do worse than him at that discount.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not gonna talk you out of Bryce Young. He is 10K. That might be cost prohibitive. I don't know. I mean, it may be a pay up to be contrarian type situation, but it seems just unnecessary when you have Matt Corral. And of course you have Malik Cunningham, who's I think scored over 30 points in every single game this year, averaging 33. And going up against the Wake Forest defense that is okay, but like I'm not worried about the Wake Forest defense. I guess, let's just, the quarterbacks are obvious here. Like Corral and Young, if you're not going to do that, what are you going to do? I mean, are you going to do Cunningham? Are you going to go real low? Are you going to play one from the Bama Ole Miss game? I mean, this slate is so interesting because we got to talk about the elephant in the room, and it's like Bama Ole Miss.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think you can stack this game with both sides and just say, listen, I'm playing Young, I'm playing Corral, and I'll get different at the receiving options, and then I'll get different somewhere else. Right? So a lot of our conversation, and I'll start with this, is that the way that we talk, I think, through the slate mostly is geared towards GPPs more than it is cash. And so to win a GPP, you need to be different somewhere. Mm-hmm. You don't necessarily need to be entirely contrarian throughout your lineup, but you need to figure out ways to be different within that structure. So playing Corral and Young is fine, and I'm all for it. I think this is a week to consider paying up at quarterback, at least for at minimum one of the options. But get different elsewhere, which I think is a totally reasonable strategy. So I'm willing to get different at another quarterback if I'm playing Corral, but I think Corral's going to come in at much higher roster ship than Young is. So I'm not afraid to pay up for Young either, because I think that Corral's going to be a lot more, at least 5 to 10% more popular than Young is.
And I think having both might be contrarian. I mean, I'm not sure a lot of people are going to feel comfortable because you're going to have to go like 4K for a lot of guys if you go both Corral and Young, and people may not be comfortable with that. So I think going both of them and filling in the rest of your roster could be interesting. I mean, those guys go without saying. You also have Cunningham. He's a fine choice. It's just, if I'm going to pay that number, I think I'm going to take a guy from the game we just talked about. Like, I don't think I'm going to pay the second most expensive price for a guy who's not even in that game.
So the argument that I'll play devil's advocate here is, if Cunningham's coming in 10%, 15% with lower rostership than Corral is, I really don't mind playing Cunningham, because I think Cunningham and Corral probably score a similar amount of points.
30, yeah.
So I'm fine going Young and Corral, or maybe even Corral and Cunningham. I think that's possible as well. I do think Corral's going to be the highest rostered quarterback on the slate. So I'm totally cool with playing Cunningham, because I think Cunningham's just going to eat this week. Like he's done all season. He's just on fire, and I'm not ready to put him out yet. And I do think playing a Bama quarterback and Cunningham is a viable strategy, but that is extremely cost prohibitive. So
I mean, I think Corral has the highest ceiling, like
yes,
40
he does.
plus. I actually don't know if Young has 50, 40 to 50 point ceiling, just because they will run some. I mean, with Ole Miss, it just all goes through Corral. With Alabama, they will stick to some semblance of a running game. And then you've got, Cunningham, like you said, is the entire offense. He's got 40 in him. So yeah, I mean, I guess, Bryce Young being 10K just kind of doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but so I agree he shouldn't probably be super popular. Okay, and we can't just beat that to death enough. You got Max Duggan versus Texas. I don't think that's who I want from TCU. He's also not a discount in any way, shape, or form. Spencer Rattler, 8,800. Oh man, he's just been so blah. But I mean, he'll come in at 5% or 3% on this slate. And I mean, we know he's got 330 and 4 touchdowns in his bag.
Yeah, I'm really not touching any of the 8K quarterbacks.
Yeah, I mean, Thompson versus TCU, we just said how horrific TCU's pass defense is. That's
which it is.
Interesting. Thompson just did a 43-point performance, throwing for I think 5 touchdowns, maybe against Texas Tech. So,
I think he'll be popular as well because he's priced down on the slate. But again, I just think you get better values outside of that range. I don't really want to touch Thompson. I think there are better plays in that game in general. Whether it's in the running game or just playing a wide receiver in a one-off, I'm just not sure Thompson's the guy I want in that like in a lineup this week. I don't think he's particularly great quarterback, and so I
don't think so either.
I'm a little scared to play him, even though the matchup is fantastic. I'd rather settle for somebody that I know is a good historical producer, or who I think is a good quarterback.
Well, yeah, and I mean, given that offense, like it could just be Bijan week. I mean, Bijan could go for 5 touchdowns. Like the way that offense is going, I don't think you're guaranteed that it's going to all run through Thompson. So
they're not going to score 70
Johnson week like it was freaking last week.
Yeah, they're not going to score 70 again.
Right.
So that's put that out of the equation, and he's not really a runner. So this is a cap ceiling, I think, which is TCU. So who actually knows? I'm a little worried about Thompson this week at his price point. If he was cheaper, I'd be a lot more interested.
Yeah, I agree. So dipping under 8K, we've got Desmond Ritter at 7,500. I like him just because he's like pretty much the offense. I mean, Jerome Ford gets some, but it just everything runs through Ritter. And Bazelak, who's a big, we are a Bazelak stan podcast here. 7,300. We've already talked about that Tennessee game. Hendon Hooker, you've mentioned to me, he's only 6,800. He does run. He gets this Missouri defense, which cannot stop anybody. But he's questionable. So keep an ear to the ground. I don't think their other quarterback is going to play. So like if it's neither of them, then you're talking about Harrison Bailey. I don't know what that means. So we need Hooker to be ready to go. The latest update is that it's unclear. We haven't gotten a lot of information. He left last week's game with an undisclosed injury. Thank you, college football, for being completely opaque with injuries. And then another guy I know you like to talk about is Tanner Mckee, all the way down at 6,500. He obviously allows you to do a whole lot of things. So between Ritter, Bazelak, Hooker, and Mckee, how do you rank them?
So in terms of price adjustment, I think Mckee is the best play. And Mckee and Bazelak are like 1 and 2, and they're really, really close for me. So I want to talk about Mckee first because he is a true salary savings. He's $3,000 cheaper than Malik Cunningham. He's doing math in my head, $2,700 cheaper than Corral. He's $3,500 cheaper than Bryce Young, right? But he's been really good. Since taking over as the starter, he has 25.2 fantasy points for Stanford. They're 7-point underdog, but he should really see a lot of pass attempts given that Stanford has 53% pass rate. And USC currently ranks 83rd in terms of pass attempt on, like, the EPA per pass attempt on defense. He's cheap. And I really, really am interested in him this week. I think he's a very, very good way to save money. And I think he has potential 4 to 5x upside. And you can't say that about a lot of quarterbacks on the slate.
Wow,
I really
you
like
think he
Mckee
could
this
push
week.
30 points?
Yeah, I do. I really like Mckee this week.
They're probably going to have to score.
Yeah, I think they will. So Bazelak, who is, I think, very close to Mckee. I really like Bazelak last week. He didn't quite pay off, but I do think he's going to have a solid week this week. The game spread is 63 points. Missouri's a slight underdog here. I think he's going to be good again this week. I think that the defense, Tennessee's defense ranks 73rd in EPA per pass attempt. Missouri ranks near the top of the country with a 58.3% neutral game pass rate. I just think he's going to be super solid this week. And I think that there's pieces around him to make him a productive quarterback. So at 7,300, again, a discount. And then if Hooker plays, he's been extremely productive in the absence of Joe Milton. So I'm actually okay stacking Bazelak and Hooker in like a couple lineups as well, because I think that that's a way to pay up for other positions. And I think both are going to be fairly soft this week in terms of defense. So I'm quite interested in all three of those quarterbacks.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think Hooker's real interesting because he'll legitimately give you, 50 potential on the ground.
Yep.
Where those other guys won't necessarily give you that. So yeah, there are some good cheap options, under 7K even, and low under 75 and under 7. So, let's get to running backs. Bijan Robinson last week, an egregious 7,200, I think it was. He was his usual awesome self. He's now week to week, he has now increased from 7,200 and scored 30 points to being 8,700. A tremendous increase in price. I still think he's probably worth it. We've seen $9,000-$10,000 running backs on a slate before, so he's still not that high, even being the RB1. How can you fit Bijan and all these other guys?
It really depends on your build, to be honest, but I do think Bijan is like probably the best running back play on the slate if we're not adjusting for price. I think he's the potential to be the highest scoring. I think he has the potential to be the highest scoring performer, including quarterbacks this week. I think that he gets that Horned Frogs defense that's allowing a 24.8% explosive rush rate. They're ranking 118th in defensive EPA per rush attempt. He has 6 100-yard performances over his last 8 games. I mean, there's nothing I could say bad about Bijan. And the only reason that I don't think he's priced higher into the 9K range is because Roschon Johnson stole like 3 touchdowns or 2 touchdowns from him last week.
And I don't know why they do that.
Yes, Bijan had a big run to set them up, like 20 or 30 yards each time, and they pulled him off just to get a breather. And then Johnson stole the touchdown. So I think he is still $800 cheaper than what he should be. So I love Bijan. I love everything about Bijan this week.
Hard not to. Then we have Tyler Batty, who's kind of become a very interesting player for Missouri this year. He's a workhorse. He's getting 20 in other games against FBS opponents. He's gotten 23 or more touches, and he's got 20 balls in 4 games. I think it is 10 in one particular game. So he's got what you want in a PPR. It's Tennessee. I mean, you gotta like Batty. The question is he in a weird price point where he's not a lot of savings? And if you're going to spend that money, do you just want to go all the way to Bijan Robinson? But certainly worth considering, and he's got tremendous PPR upside.
Yeah, no, I like him this week. He's averaging 26.1 weighted opportunities, which is attempts plus targets times 1.5, because targets are more valuable than attempts are, and receptions are more valuable. So it's a slight discount on attempts, and then weighted targets heavier. I mean, he's ridiculous. He's just involved in every aspect of the game. They're slight dogs this week, and that might actually be better because he's just so involved in the passing game. He has 6.3 targets per game. I like him and Bijan both a lot this week. I think there's a better chance that Bijan hits a higher ceiling, just given that I think this is a slightly more difficult matchup for Batty, even though he's heavily involved in the passing game. So I do prefer him at that price. But I do think if you want to play him, I'm not going to tell you not to.
Well, and Batty, the other thing with Batty is he hasn't hit 100 yards yet this season. So, he had he did hit 200 yards against Central Michigan, but then against SEC teams, Kentucky 61, but he caught 10 passes, which saved his day. But he was only 49K back then. And then against Boston College, 18 for 72. He did get in the end zone twice, but 5 for 34 on the through the air. And again, he was only 6,900. If he doesn't score 2 touchdowns, he could be. I mean, he could flop. He has a much bigger flop potential, I think, than Bijan Robinson. So I'm probably not going to play a lot of Batty. He's not a savings, and he's a little more risky than I really want to take on. I can't believe how high Blake Corum is. 7,600, third most expensive running back. Wisconsin. Hard pass for you?
Yeah, hard pass.
He
got shut down by Rutgers last week, and if he thought Rutgers was hard, Wisconsin's just another beast.
Well, and he doesn't even catch a lot of passes. So, you're banking on mostly running. He's scored 3 touchdowns against Washington and Northern Illinois, but, he can easily be at 15 points or less, I think, in his matchup.
Yeah, and the thing with him is that he was cheaper last week, got Rutgers, got shut down by Rutgers, and is now priced up. I don't really understand the
against a really good defense
algorithm that went into that. Yeah, he's just not in play for me this week.
No, he can't be. Zack Evans, we are big fans of Zack Evans. He has blown up since his kind of weird, suspension against, I think it was Duquesne. But against Cal, had 22 carries for 190. He then had 15 for 113 against SMU, 3 receptions for 70 yards and a score. So heavily involved in all phases. He scored 30 points in back-to-back weeks, and now he gets Texas that isn't very good. And he's a pretty nice discount. I mean, 7,400 for a guy who just scored 30 in back-to-back weeks. He's got that explosive long play to where he's the kind of guy where one play can be a 75-yard touchdown at any given moment. I really like Zack Evans. I'd love to play him this week. Again, it's going to come down to, there's a lot of really good plays. I think Zack Evans is he's got the 30-point ceiling you're hoping for with Bijan at a pretty steep discount. So I think Zack Evans has the ceiling to make it worth going 74K on him, 7,400.
Yep, I agree with that. The only thing I'll add is that Texas ranks bottom 30 in both explosive run rate allowed and yards per rush attempt. So this is a very good matchup, and the spread is close enough where I think Evans will be heavily involved.
Well, yeah, and he catches passes either way, but
yep.
Okay, we talked about Deuce Vaughn, CJ Verdell. I think you highlighted CJ Verdell in your article. Tell us a little about him. He comes in at 7K. On first glance, I'm probably not interested.
Yeah, so I actually like him and Travis Dye this week. Stanford is bottom 25 in explosive rush rate, and they're bottom 10 in EPA per rush attempt. So I just think this is a phenomenal matchup for both running backs. He's averaging 50% of the team's rush attempts, 18 weighted opportunities per game thus far. That's enough to pay off at his price point, which is a flat 7K. Oregon likes to run the ball. I really like Verdell's opportunity this week to smash that price point, and I think he's absolutely in play at 7K if you want to get different, because I don't think he's going to be super popular given the other high-end running back options. So I like Verdell a lot, and I like Travis Dye. I like the entire Oregon rushing game this week.
Yeah. Well, Dye, I think, is a decent play at a bigger discount. Letty Brown, we're big fans of Letty Brown here. The Texas Tech run defense is not too impressive. EPA per rush is 83rd worst in the country. They're okay, kind of explosive rush rate. They're kind of middling. So I think Letty Brown's interesting at 6,900. He's still a guy you can almost lock and load 23 touches, for 6,900. He does have, he scored a 75-yarder the other week, so he does have long speed. I wouldn't classify him as like a truly explosive back. He also catches 3 to 4 passes a game, so I do like Letty Brown. I think I'm gonna like do Bijan or Zack Evans or go real cheap. So these kind of middle guys maybe as a way to be different, but I'm not going to find myself like being too excited. You've got Jerome Ford, who gets a good matchup against Notre Dame, but does not catch any passes. Trevon Henderson, what are your thoughts on Henderson? I mean, he's an elite talent, but as a DFS play.
Yeah, I don't think this is the week for him. I think Rutgers showed that they could shut down the run last week with, I don't think either Corum or Hassan Haskins averaged over 4 yards carry. I think Rutgers is just good defense, so I'm not really playing Henderson this week. I just think there are better options.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the case. And I still am not 100% sure if they're going to give him like 20-plus touches every single week. I mean, he has had that before, but I kind of think they could still work in 2 or 3 running backs. Okay, let's talk about the Tennessee backfield. You've got Tyon Evans, who I guess is kind of the lead, but they definitely split almost 50-50 with Jabari Small. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I think they split opportunities last week 50-50 right down the middle.
Mm-hmm. So, Evans, you have beat the drum for the Missouri run defense. It is bad. You've got Evans at 6,200, but if you can tell me at 4,400, Jabari Small is going to be a guy that's going to get the similar workload, I think you can find him in the bargain bin. So I know you really like Small. Here's your time. Go for it.
I love both options this week. I expect Small to be fairly popular, which is fine. He's averaging 14.8 weighted opportunities per game. The Missouri run defense is bottom 3 in the country, and that includes some really, really bad teams. They are awful, just truly awful. I've said this to Alfred. I've said this a couple times. I think there's a chance that the winning tournament lineup for this week features both Jabari Small and Tyon Evans. And Small at 4,400 is an $1,800 discount on Tyon Evans. And while I expect him to be popular, I'm still okay rostering both. And I think that's a really interesting way to get different. And Jabari Small at 4,400 is the way to get savings on this slate in a lot of places where we want to pay up for different values.
Yeah, I love Jabari Small, 4,400. He will be in so many of my lineups. And I guess if you're going to roster both, I mean, are you thinking they both go for 102? I guess they don't have to at the cost.
Yeah, right.
Can they really get to 100?
Yeah, they could. Yeah.
I don't think that's unreasonable.
I don't know. So teams are averaging 270 yards per game against Missouri.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's
very bad.
And it's not like they've played some like world beater teams, right? They allowed Boston College to run all over them last week. They allowed Southeastern Missouri to run all over them for like 270 yards. Their run defense is so bad.
I don't know what it is. Scheme, talent, both. I mean, it takes some work to be that bad, to be honest with you. But
it really does. I don't know what's going on with that team, because I actually thought it was going to be. I mean, I didn't think it was going to be very good. I know their secondary is a lot better, but I thought it would be a little bit better than that bottom 3 in the country. Yeah. And that's what they've been. They've just been brutal. And you can play both players, and you can play them both in the same lineup. I think that is a way to get different on a very difficult slate to get different on.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a great thought. And I blew it. I spend all this time making these graphics every week. Zack Evans is the smash of the week. Kind of already laid out why. Just wanted to be able to use the graphic there. So there he is, 7,400. I will definitely be playing some Zack Evans. Okay. Christian Beal-Smith against a bad Louisville run defense. He's 6,000. That's pretty nice. And then I wanted to highlight Nathaniel Pete, 5,500. He's got long speed. He breaks off some big ones. And there's a chance if Austin Jones doesn't go, I kind of like him against Oregon getting the majority of the touches. Last week, he got 13 attempts and 4 receptions in the absence of Austin Jones against a very good UCLA defense. So, I think if you can say flirt with 20 touches for 5,500 and he's got big playability, I'm interested again as a way to be different.
Yeah, I don't hate that. I think if we're getting an injury discount, that's really nice.
All right. I guess any other running backs you want to highlight? I know you already did Travis Dye. He's down here, nice and cheap. And then he's at 5,300. Jabari Small, 44. I mean, you can't get much cheaper than that. Anybody else?
No, those are my favorite two in the sub 5.5 range. I think Jabari Small. If I had to guess who the highest rostered running back this week is, I would say Jabari Small. He comes in my model as the top play on the slate in terms of price adjustment. So there is risk there. I think Travis Dye is an interesting alternative. He has 900 more. So I'm going to play a lot of Jabari Small because I think that he's just going to be extremely productive this week. But it is coming with a lot of risk of you're just eating the chalk. That is a fair warning.
Yeah. Here's one way to be different. A guy that I actually slid into one of my mock lineups that I drew up earlier today. That's Henry Parrish for Ole Miss. He's a true sophomore, and he's actually getting about the same amount of opportunities. They kind of split this backfield 3 ways, but he's only seen 6 less opportunities than Ely. And that's 6 less rushes. They've got the exact same amount of receptions, 6 each. They have the same amount of touchdowns, 1 each. Snoop Connor's kind of their hammer near the goal line, but he does not really catch passes. But I think Henry Parrish at 4,300 in this game is certainly someone that I think you could get a piece of this action without having to spend too much. He's a running back, so you can get a cheap running back, 4,300, even less than Jabari Small. And, I think 2 to 3 receptions is in play for him as well. He's way less than Jerry and Ely, and they're about the same in terms of opportunity. So, I think that's interesting. And he kind of came up for me as a guy that, for cost savings, I might throw in there just to get a piece of that game. Just one more piece at a reasonable price. All right, so let's move on to wide receivers, Chris. We've already touched on Drake London. He is by far and away the most expensive, 8,500. The next closest guy is only 7,700. I think it's warranted. Do you have any numbers on his targets? I mean, I know he's just obscene. He's got double-digit receptions in 3 out of 4 games.
Yeah, he's averaging 3.8 targets per game and 31 over his last 2. He's just the man. I just think you can play him again this week and just be fine. He's averaging 30 DraftKings points per game. Colorado's defense is not particularly good. I don't really care about how Keaton Slovis is playing because he's locked in on Drake London. You can play him. You just plug him in if you have this. If you have the space to do so, you're not going to go wrong with Drake London this week.
And I guarantee you, he's not going to be very highly rostered because
probably not
price point, and it's not a fun game. It's not an exciting game. It's not a game with a massive total the way some of these other ones are. So, it's a way to get different, that's for sure. And different without being risky because he's different, but he's absolute stud.
Yep.
Let's just talk about all the receivers. Let's just lump them all together. You've got Jameson Williams for Bama, long, deep threat. Drummond, who's kind of inherited the Eli Moore role at Ole Miss. You've got Mckee. You've got Mingo. I mean, these are 4 receivers in the same game are top 10, top 15 salaries on the slate.
Yeah, so I am off Jameson Williams. I'm on John Mechie. Williams is just a guy who relies on the big plays, and they will be there this week. So I think he's going to be fine if you want to plug him in. I'm not saying don't. Mechie's just averaging 7.3 targets. Williams is only averaging 5.5. Mechie has 16 targets over the last 2 games. Williams has 10. I just think you're getting a discount for $600 that you can spend elsewhere. I think that Mechie's going to be heavily involved in the game plan as well this week. I'm not really worried about him. As for Drummond, he's just been phenomenal. He's accounting for a 25.9% target share. he's one of the more expensive, receivers in the slate. I'm not particularly worried about it, to be honest. I think that he's fine. I also think Jonathan Mingo, who you brought up, another super interesting option. He's $1,400 cheaper than Drummond, and he is averaging 8 targets per game, and he's matched Drummond's target share in their last game, which I think is fairly interesting. He's averaging 9 full DraftKings points fewer than Drummond, but he's also averaging 8.1 unrealized fantasy points per contest. So unrealized fantasy points, we kind of talked about it a little bit last week. How I calculate that is based on the number of targets the players have, the average depth of their target, and then I take into account the yards after catch that they've accrued, how many targets they've accrued, any touchdowns they've scored, the receptions that they've had compared to their targets. And so it all comes together in terms of an unrealized fantasy points calculation, which does not take into account touchdowns. It just says, here's how many points you should have scored based on the number of receptions that you should have had and the yards you should have had. So it takes the randomness of touchdowns away to try to provide a true number to kind of latch onto in terms of opportunity. So Mingo is a guy that I think is underperforming what his opportunity is. And I think that he could smash this week at 6,100. I think that he's a really nice option off of Drummond, and the same way that Mckee is a nice option off of Jameson Williams.
Yeah. That's a great rundown. I'm not even going to add anything. Just to stick with the theme of the game, I mean, there are guys further down the line to get. I mean, I think we need to do a thorough analysis of this game. We got a bargain bin guy and Jaleel Billingsley. You brought him to my attention. He had certainly, so he's like a tight end wide receiver hybrid. He's only 3,600. So to get a guy who could be featured at all in this game for 3,600 is really something we have to consider. I think it was a great find. He's a tight end. He was in the doghouse, but now he's not in the doghouse, I don't think. So is he, what? Yeah. Well, I mean, give me your take here. Like, is he trustworthy?
So he has 7 targets over the last 2 games, and they haven't had to throw a whole lot. So I think that's still fairly solid. Bryce Young really likes to check it down too. His ADOT is like 8.5 or 8.4. So he doesn't have a high depth of target, and he relied on Latu early in the season. Now Jaleel Billingsley is his guy, and I think Billingsley is like a good player. I think he's fine. He's a little slight for a tight end at the NFL level, but he's still a good college tight end.
Oh, yeah.
He's running the 3rd most routes on the team also over the last 2 weeks, which I think is fairly interesting. This game is going to be a shootout. 3,600. Lock me in on Billingsley. I think that he is the best salary-saving option to get into this massive total.
Yeah, definitely have no problems with Billingsley. I thought that was a pretty good call by you when we were texting about it earlier in the week. There's other guys I'm just looking in this game. I mean, Braylon Sanders for Ole Miss. He was kind of thought to be a guy, but it's really Drummond and I guess Mingo. But at 4,800, is he the 3, I guess, right now? I mean, he caught 4 receptions last game, 4 for 74 and a touchdown. Other than that, 2 for 25 and 2 for 34. So not super exciting there. Thoughts?
Yeah. No, I agree with that. He's just a little pricier than I wanted. I just think there's better options like Billingsley to get into this game.
Yeah.
And I'd rather pay it for Mingo at 6,100. Like that's kind of where it lies with him.
That makes sense. All right. So other receivers, I mean, that game is just so chock full. I think we have to talk about Xavier Worthy for Texas, given how awful Texas Christian's he's an explosive player. Texas Christian allows explosive plays. Maybe you don't play Thompson because we kind of ruled him out earlier, but Xavier Worthy, a true freshman, like breaking out in a big way. Jack him up your Devi boards, Dynasty boards, C2C boards, all that good stuff. And also, you're going to play him this week.
I think you can. I think they play defense that ranks bottom 10 in EPA per pass attempt and pass yards per attempt. I don't see why not. 43% explosive pass rate. I'm not in a Casey Thompson because I think this is mostly a Bijan week, but that doesn't mean that Casey Thompson isn't going to have like 250 and 2 and 120 of that
right
250 might go to Xavier Worthy, who has 14 targets in his last 2 games.
No,
he's the alpha there. 6,200 is not a bad price given the defense.
He's also probably going to be very popular. People will perceive a discount there coming off a 3-touchdown game, and we're not the only people in the world that know about this explosive pass rate. So I think he's going to be pretty popular. You've got both Ohio State guys. Hard to go wrong there. It's been a couple weeks, I feel like, since Ohio State was on the slate. Maybe it's only been 1 or 2 weeks, but it feels like it's been a while. We always want Garrett Wilson if he's priced under Olave. I mean, it's as simple as that.
What is going on here? I still don't get it. Yeah. Like, he is at 31% target share. He has 9.8 targets per game. He's got 14 over his last 2.
Yeah.
The matchup is fine this week. I'd much rather play Garrett Wilson over Olave once again. I just don't get it. I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't want Quentin Johnson. The pass, volume just isn't there. He's a good NFL prospect, but as far as DFS is concerned, he had 2 touchdowns against Cal. Still didn't get over 100 yards though. Yeah, I mean, I can't do it there. Bowers, tight end for Georgia. I'm not paying $6,400 for a true freshman tight end. I don't care how good he is, especially in that game. Ezukanma, Texas Tech. He's been very good, but not against West Virginia. At West Virginia, not interested there. Kind of gets like the high end is very exciting, and then it just drops. Like, I don't want any of these guys. A.T. Perry, I'd rather take Roberson for a big discount all the way down to 5,200. So that's actually intriguing against the Louisville defense, which I don't think is very good against the pass.
No, I like Roberson as well this week. He's leading 5.8 unrealized fantasy points on the table per game. He's still averaging 6 targets per game. He's still leading the team in target share. A.T. Perry's actually been a very solid option. He's looked good. He's played well. So I do think that he's a legit part of that offense. This game also has a total set in the low 60s. I think it's 60.5. Roberson at 5.2, I think that's a really nice price for him. I think that he might be popular because of that, but I'm still in on him. And I want to go back to Ezukanma real quick because I think I like Ezukanma a little bit because he has 9.7 unrealized fantasy points per game. I think his ceiling is much higher than we're seeing currently. 16 targets over the last 2 games, 9 targets per game in the season. I think Columbia looked pretty good last week. I don't think this is the worst matchup given what we've seen for the West Virginia secondary this so far, at least so far this year. I kind of like Ezukanma a little bit, I think more than you do. At 6,300, it's kind of somewhat of a hard sell because I think I'd take Mingo there, but I do think he's going to be low rostered in this slate in general as well. So yeah. Interesting, a really interesting play.
Yeah, okay. I'll take that. Anybody else on the real cheap end? I mean, we already hit on Billingsley. We can get out of here, but you want to highlight anybody else down the list?
I feel like I'm a glutton for punishment at this point, taking Marvin Mims at 4.8K.
Oh,
so he just has not been this alpha that we expected, but Kansas State's passing defense hasn't been very good. And if they're going to get back on track this week, I think Mims leads the charge. He's cheaper than Mario Williams. He's cheaper than Jadon Haselwood. I mean,
it's wild. I don't understand.
4.8 is a really nice value for a guy who was the undisputed alpha as a true freshman. I like Mims, and that's going against all the data that I have. I'm just saying, I just think he's the best wide receiver in that roster. And then secondarily, I think you can play Darius Davis or Tay Barber. Darius Davis is 4K for TCU. Tay Barber, 4.8K. I highlighted Davis last week, and he was pretty good. He recorded 5 targets, second on team in routes run. I think Quentin Johnson is in play this week. I'm not itching to play him, but I think you can. Tay Barber had a good role last year. He finally broke out this week. I think I prefer Davis at 4K, so he's an interesting way to get different in that Texas TCU game. So I like Darius Davis. I think Tay Barber is also in play.
Yeah, and just another touch on Mingo. I don't think I realized he's been like way more productive than I realized. I mean, back-to-back games with 6 for 136, 7 for 99, and 2 touchdowns. Like,
oh, absolutely.
He's had 28 points back-to-back weeks. And in this game, You think he'll be super popular, versus Drummond?
Yep. I do. But
might not be a way to get too different, I guess.
Yeah, I think you could also pay up for Drummond and just be like, hey, I'm going to play the guy who I think is who's averaging 26% target share on the best offense in the country.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with that if you can afford it. I like Mingo a lot this week. I think 6,100 is a great price point to save money. Just know you're eating the chalk.
Sure. So I was messing around as we were talking, and we usually don't do this, but I think this is just a really interesting week. I was able to do Cunningham and Corral, our guy Jabari Small, Henry Parrish, Zack Evans in the flex, Billingsley, Mingo, and then you still have 5,500 left over for your final receiver. And you can choose from guys like Whittington, Mike Meyer from Notre Dame, Jermaine Burton. These are good players, not necessarily great DFS plays, but Roberson is actually right there available. You have $300 left over. That's an interesting lineup that I don't hate, even paying up for two of the big time quarterbacks. So I think it can be done. You're going to have to forego, your Bijan and some things like that. But certainly that's an interesting lineup. Just kind of a sample there. You can do it without being gross, actually, even if you pay up for the QBs.
Yeah, I really like that lineup. And you don't have to spend the max salary each week. In fact, a lot of the tournament wing lineups don't. Right. So don't feel like you have to get up there if you don't
within reason. So, I mean, yeah, but like 500 or less on the table it makes you different.
Exactly. Roberson at 52 over some of the options that you mentioned at 55. I mean, it's hard to say that you'd rather have those guys and spend the 300 than Roberson and not have the 300.
Just leave it on the table. I mean, Roberson is absolutely like a triple touchdown guy. I mean, like, it would not shock me if Roberson has 3 touchdowns. I mean, he did it last year, either in the bowl game or at the end of the year last year. I know he is the alpha, even though A.T. Perry's had some nice games recently, but Roberson's going to come in with like a 3 touchdown game at some point. I think he's a really fun tournament play, very cheap, good game to get exposure to as well. So, all right. Well, that's our slate. We can't really seem to get it under an hour, but this week there was a lot to talk about. There's a lot to talk about every week. We'll be doing it every single week. Tune in on Saturday morning for our live show. We will give you updates. We will tell you what has changed since we recorded this. And injury updates. Last week we were literally talking about Taj Brooks when a tweet came through that Taj Brooks was inactive. And so we're giving you real-time updates as they come through, making changes on the fly. And we also touch on the night slate, which is nice. If you lose all your money in the day slate, play the night slate. So we got a lot of stuff. Chris, you have an article both for the slate preview coming tomorrow, kind of accompanying this podcast and this YouTube video. You also have picks and props that will come out either later tomorrow or Friday morning. And then our colleague Will have a short slate preview for Saturday or for Friday night's short slate, and then he'll have picks and props as well. So we got a lot coming out. Good luck, Chris. I hope you have a great week. You've been doing it. You've been doing better than me lately.
Yeah, let's keep cashing is the bottom line. Let's keep cashing, and then one of these weeks, I think we're gonna hit it big. I feel really good about our process. So keep grinding with us.
All right, let's do it, and we'll see you guys later.